Hey, what's up, Racine Community Youth? Pastor Neil here, and I just want to thank you for tuning in. And we're going to be continuing our series called Fight the Good Fight. So, this is a series on 1st and 2nd Timothy. Now, throughout these two books, we see that Paul is writing to a young believer named Timothy to encourage him to fight the good fight of faith. Paul knew that Timothy was going to face challenges to his faith. And guess what? You and I face challenges as well. We've talked about this the last couple of weeks, that faith isn't always easy, that faith sometimes is hard, that sometimes we have to fight for our faith, that we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that we're ready and prepared for the challenges that are going to come our way. Last week, we talked specifically about prayer and the important role that prayer plays in our faith. Prayer is one of the tools that God has given us. It's our ability to communicate with God. It's our ability to share our needs, to share what's on our heart, to share our doubts and our fears. And last week we talked specifically because Paul talked about this idea that we need to pray for our leaders, specifically those that are in our government, those people like our president, those people that are elected officials. We also talked about this idea that Paul's really telling us to pray for everyone, especially those that might be in need, especially as we're thinking about our current pandemic with COVID-19. We want to pray for healthcare workers. We want to pray for people that might be more vulnerable to the virus. We want to pray for people that are being affected by people that have lost loved ones. We want to pray for those people. And all of those things are this external focus with our prayer to just ask God to be at work in all of these things that are happening around us. But today we're going to go from the external, talking about who we can pray for, to the internal. When we're talking about faith, we're talking about who does God want us to be? How does God want us to live out our faith? What does that look like? And specifically in 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul is talking to Timothy about what it means to be a leader. So last week we talked about praying for our leaders, but this week we're talking about what it means to be a leader. Specifically, what does it mean to be a leader in the church? So the first question I have for you before we get into 1 Timothy chapter 3 is this: what qualities do you look for in a leader? Think about that for a second. If you want to put a comment down in the video below, feel free to do that. We're going to talk about some of these questions. I'm going to ask you more when we have our Zoom groups this week. So make sure that you're a part of those Zoom groups. We're actually going to be meeting this Thursday, so before Good Friday. So make sure that you join us for Zoom groups, which will be tomorrow. So with all of that in mind, what are some qualities that you look for in a leader? For me, I think of experience. I think of trustworthiness. I think of integrity. If I'm going to follow somebody, I want to know that their word means something. I want to know that they have experience, that the place that I'm trying to go to is someplace that they've been, that they have the ability to be able to lead. So if I'm going to follow you, I want to make sure you know the directions. I want to make sure you know how to get there. So those are a few things that I think of when it comes to qualities that I look for in a leader. Now, in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, Paul is going to address this idea of church leadership, qualities that a leader in the church should have. So this is 1 Timothy 3, verse 1 through 7. It says this: "This is a trustworthy saying. If someone aspires to be a church leader, he desires an honorable position. So a church leader must be a man whose life is above reproach. He must be faithful to his wife. He must exercise self-control, live wisely, and have a good reputation. He must enjoy having guests in his home. He must be able to teach. He must not be a heavy drinker or be violent. He must be gentle, not quarrelsome, and not love money. He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey him. For if a man cannot manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church? A church leader must not be a new believer, because he might become proud and the devil would cause him to fall. Also, people outside the church must speak well of him, that he will not be disgraced and fall into the devil's trap. So these are some of the qualities that Paul lays out for church leadership. Specifically, when we're talking about a church leader or an overseer, we're talking about pastors. That's really the group of people that Paul is talking about here. People that have an official place of leadership in the church. People that are called to preach. People that are called to teach and watch over the flock. Watch over this group of believers. That's who Paul's talking about. He's talking to pastors. He's talking to people like me, saying these are the qualities that you need to look for in a leader. These are the qualities that you need to look for in a pastor. But Paul doesn't just stop there. Paul continues on and he addresses another group of people called deacons. So deacons are like helpers in the church. So deacons are also leaders in the church. They might not be vocationally a pastor. Being a pastor might not be their job, but they are still leaders in the church. And anybody could be a helper in the church. Anybody could be a deacon. Not everybody is called to ministry as a pastor, but everybody is called to some form of leadership in the church. So this is what Paul says. He continues in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 8 through 12. So 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 8 through 12, Paul addresses deacons, and he says this: "In the same way, deacons must be well respected and have integrity. They must not be heavy drinkers or dishonest with money. They must be committed to the mystery of faith, now revealed, and must live with a clear conscience. Before they are appointed as deacons, let them be closely examined. If they pass the test, then let them serve as deacons. In the same way, their wives must be respected and not slander others. They must exercise self-control and be faithful in everything that they do. A deacon must be faithful to his wife. He must manage his children and his household well. Those who do well as deacons must be rewarded with respect from others and will increase their confidence in their faith in Jesus Christ." So here we have some more qualities of a deacon, some qualities of a Christian leader. Again, this doesn't have to be a pastor. This can be a helper. This can be a Sunday school teacher. This could be a board member. This could be a youth leader. So, based on what Paul is saying here, what are some of the qualities a Christian leader should have? So that's my second question for you. What are some of the qualities that Paul says a Christian leader should have? So there's a good list of them that Paul gives there. He says they should be faithful. They should exhibit self-control. They shouldn't love money. They shouldn't be a heavy drinker. They must be kind. They must be hospitable. And let other people come and see them and spend time with them in their home. They should be gentle, not angry or violent. So here what we see is we see lots of qualities of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are all qualities that people should have, that Christians should have, especially as God is challenging us and encouraging us to grow in our faith and to take on different leadership roles. Those are important things. But I think it's really interesting that one of the things that Paul talks about the most is this idea that relationships matter, specifically our relationships with our families. As a leader, as a pastor, I'm judged by how am I as a father? How am I as a husband? Those relationships matter. In fact, Paul even goes so far as to say, leaders, pastors, if you're not loving and leading your family well, how can you possibly lead the church? Can I tell you something? For me, as a pastor, when I read this, that's super convicting. How I interact with my family, how I love my family, how I love my wife and my children, that's of the utmost importance. Now, I know for some of you, you might have a different role. For most of you students, your You're a son, you're a daughter, you're a brother, you're a sister. But guess what? Those relationships that you have with your family, those matter. Those count. Those are important. Your love for your family reveals your love for God. So, what does that look like for you? I want to end here with just a couple more questions. I want us to really think, what does it look like to be fit for the fight? If our ability to lead is judged on our love for our family, if it's based on our relationships with those closest to us, how are you doing? Are you fit for the fight? What are some areas in your life that you need to work on? Maybe there's some of those qualities that you struggle to display. Maybe you struggle with self control. Maybe you struggle with being angry. Maybe you struggle in your relationships with your brother or your sister. Maybe you struggle in your relationships with your parents. What are some areas in your life that you need to work on? My next question and my last question, and then we'll wrap things up, is this. Are there relationships in your life that reveal a lack of love? Are there relationships in your life that reveal a lack of love? Think about that. Take time to really evaluate your relationships, especially with your family. Those are the people that you're spending the most time with right now. You can't go out and hang out with your friends. You can't go to school. So what do your relationships at home look like? How has this time of being quarantined, being self-isolated in your home, how has that affected your relationships with your parents? How has that affected your relationships with your siblings? We want to take some time to talk about that and think about that. So I really challenge you, I encourage you to look at your relationships and what do those relationships reveal about your relationship with God. Because to be fit for the fight, it really starts at home. It starts with our relationships with our family. So thanks for tuning in today. Just know that we love you. We care about you. We're praying for you. We're praying for your family. And we look forward to being able to connect with you in the days ahead. We're going to have Zoom groups on Thursday night at 4 p.m. We're going to have Good Friday service this Friday at 7 p.m. You can check that out on Facebook. And then Easter Sunday service, Sunday at 10 a.m. I would love it for you and your family to join us online, to watch, share the video, share the good news with somebody that you know about Jesus Christ, about his death and his resurrection. We love you, and we'll see you later. Peace.